Hi everyone, this is Scott Brick. Thanks for joining me here in my studio. I am just getting started on a book by Landon Beach. For those of you who enjoyed The Wreck, the first book in the Great Lakes saga, we thought you might enjoy this preview of the next book in the series, which is called The Sail. So I've got it up here on my tablet. Just a little backstory. This is from the very beginning of the story. There are two men in a small aircraft flying over Lake Superior. And one of them, Wilson, he's the experienced pilot. But then he's got a rather inexperienced co-pilot named Morris. And their job seems to be a little dangerous. And when the pilot reminds the co-pilot about this, the co-pilot flashes back to a moment 5 months earlier. I thought that might be a good time to pick up on this little preview, show you just what the stakes are in this new book by Landon Beach. Off we go. The plane glided to a stop on the moonlit surface of the water. Wilson shut down the engine and Morris moved aft to open the cargo door. Water lapped against the seaplane's pontoons, and a stiff summer breeze blew into the plane. Wilson joined him, and together they positioned the two bags on the back bench. Once this was done, Morris jumped down onto one of the pontoons. Wilson passed him a pair of binoculars. Morris scanned the horizon. "We radio them, right?" "We maintain radio silence, Jimmy." Morris dropped the binoculars around his neck. "Oh, right," he said. Wilson could see that Morris was nervous. Couldn't blame him, though. Wilson had been scared out of his crow his first time. "Don't be asking any questions when they show up. Just pass the bags to the boat crew very carefully," said Wilson. "Then we get right back in the plane and head home." "Do we ever find out what's in the bags?" The binoculars were up again as Morris scanned for the boat. "Don't you listen?" Wilson said. "It's all part of the deal. The bags take off from Vancouver by truck, travel through Winnipeg, and end up at our seaplane dock in Lake of the Woods, where we load the bags and lake hop until we touch down here in Lake Superior. We deliver the bags, don't say no fucking word to nobody, and then head back and wait until we're needed again." Okay, Pally, lighten up," Morris said. "Where do the bags go after we transfer them?" "No clue," said Wilson, "and I don't want to know." "What happened to your last co-pilot?" The motor of a powerboat in the distance could be heard. Wilson looked at his watch. 1:25 a.m. "It's them. Get ready." Morris scanned left and saw nothing. Holding onto the wing with one hand, he leaned out over the water. Farther to the right, he thought he could see the outline of a boat approaching them with no running lights on. "I think I've got 'em." "Remember, not a word," said Wilson. "Aye, aye, sir." Morris saluted with a shaky grin. Wilson didn't hear him as he ducked back in the plane. He moved to the cockpit and retrieved a revolver from under his seat. If they thought of pulling anything tonight, he'd be ready. No way would he be taken as easily as Wilfred had been. Dumb. So dumb. Why did Wilfred have to look in the bags? Why did he have to ask the men on the boat about the contents? Stupid. Captain J.W. Wilson had been sober for 3 years, but when they took Wilfred away that night, he'd broken at the first waypoint home. The metallic scraping sound of the lid being unscrewed, the aroma from the first whiff as he put his nose over the bottle, the watering of his mouth, the sweat on his neck, the feel of the smooth bottle in his weathered hands, the slow, deep breaths and the thump of his heart as he raised the bottle to his mouth. And finally, the first warm spirits hitting the back of his throat as he sucked on the bottle and gulped. Liberation. Heaven. The dulling of pain. The memory of Wilfred's screams lanced through his mind, and he had to shake his head to snap out of it. He slid the gun in between his belt and trousers, and then untucked his shirt to cover it. The boat approached, and 2 men in dark T-shirts and blue jeans, one he'd dubbed Tall and the other Gun, walked to the stern of the cabin cruiser. Tall picked up a line as the third man, the helmsman, backed down the boat and then cut the engine. Tall threw the line to Morris. His hands were sweaty, and he almost dropped it, but got a grip and secured it to the pontoon. Tall and Gun pulled on the line until the starboard gunwale was a foot or two away from the pontoon, and then tied the line off to a pair of cleats. Wilson tapped Morris's shoulder, and Morris looked back and then took the bag Wilson was holding out. He transferred it to Gunn, and Gunn passed it to the helmsman who stowed it below. When Morris passed the second bag over the gunwale, Tall spoke to him. "Come aboard." "We've got something to show you," Tall said. Morris snapped his head around to Wilson. Okay, so this is what I do when I make a mistake. I click this a couple of times. It's a tally clicker. The waveform going across the computer, across my screen. When you see those lines, when you see the jump of the sound, the editor knows to go back and take it out. Morris snapped his head around to Wilson and looked at him as if asking, "What do I do?" Wilson just nodded. The helmsman took the second bag below as Tall and Gunn helped Morris board. Wilson began to slide his hand under his shirt, but stopped when the helmsman reappeared. Tall uncleated the line and threw it to Wilson. "We'll be back in 10 minutes, said the helmsman. Wilson gave a thumbs-up sign and began coiling the line. 50-50 chance he'd never see Morris again. The helmsman turned on the engine and drove the boat away. 3 minutes later, he shut off the engine and Tall went below and returned with a weight belt, mask, and dive light. "Strip down to your skivvies, Jimmy," Tall ordered. "What the—" Gunn cut Morris off. "Are you supposed to be talking?" Morris shook his head and began removing his clothes. Tall motioned to the water off the stern. "We need a little help tonight. There's some thing down there that we need to make sure is staying put." Tall bent down over the transom and dipped his hand in Lake Superior. "Water's not too bad tonight, but I advise that you make it quick." Morris was in his underwear now, ghost-white legs and sunken chest with small patches of hair exposed to the night air. He shivered as Tall passed him the equipment. "It's about 15 feet straight down, Toothpick. We'll wait for you up here," Tall said. Morris sat on the deck and swung his feet over the stern. The water rose up past his ankles. His rear began to feel cold as the water on the deck soaked his underwear. He turned on his light and jumped in. The shock of the cold water made him shake, and he almost dropped the light. The weight belt did its job. He continued to sink. Once he made it to the bottom, he would look for this thing and then get the hell out of there. Yes, he was freezing, but this should be easy. It came out of the dark as his feet hit the lake floor and he swung his light around. A human body with no arms, one eyeball missing, and small bites taken out of its face and legs. The legs. The legs were anchored to the lake bottom by heavy-duty rope and 2 cinder blocks. Morris went to scream, but then he saw a silver chain around the neck. He reached for it. At the end of the loop was a flattened rectangle of silver. Holding the rectangle in his hand, he aimed the light down and read the inscription. "Fast Eddie Wilford." "Now," he screamed, sending a stream of bubbles up. The sound of the motor starting above made Morris drop the chain, release the weight belt, and he kicked upward. His head broke the surface of the water, and he looked up into the eyes of Tall, peering down at him over the transom. "Don't ever look in the bags or talk about your job," Tall said. Morris nodded. Then Tall turned around, and the boat sped away. 15 minutes later, the seaplane was taxiing toward Morris. Yeah, things kind of go south from there for a number of different people. Lots of action and intrigue in this title, and a lot of fun as well. As I said before, if you enjoyed The Wreck by Landon Beach, which is book 1 of the Great Lakes Saga, I think you'll enjoy The Sail, book 2. Hope you join me. It'll be out soon. Take care.